Hello. So this is the commentary for lesson 4, which is to understand what we mean by the term perceptive inferences. So what will happen in the lesson, if you look in the notes section of the PowerPoint, I will tell you which minutes of the YouTube clip to look at that will help you out with understanding the content on the slides. And remember, please keep giving us feedback so I know if this is working or not. So if we start off with slide 2, which is where we talk about what we mean by a perceptive response. The AQA Aiming for Grades 8 to 9 booklet calls a perceptive response developed. So obviously you talk through your idea in detail. It's insightful, exploratory. So exploratory might suggest that you're looking at different interpretations of it. It's conceptual, which means that it's based on mental concepts. So a clever idea potentially that's not immediately obvious to most people and is more about the metaphysical than the physical, if you like. It's abstract, so that's about feelings and ideas rather than the physical, and it's an imaginative. So I've put in the pink box there to put it crudely. It's essentially think about what everyone else will write and then don't write it. Write something that's contextually appropriate, and what we mean by that is something that still fits with the situation that the text is referring to. But just think, okay, what do I immediately think? And yeah, my suggestion is don't write that. If we look at slide 3, this is a learning check for you if you can understand what is a perceptive response here. So a perceptive response to 3 different things, which is happiness, colour and physicality, and strength. So the perceptive response for happiness might be B, because it's an abstract painting, it's got happy colours in it, we can see a face in it almost. It's not quite as immediately obvious as the little boy smiling. For colour and physicality, it would also be B. Response A would be what we would expect of a clear response, because it talks about the paint being bright and red. It's a very obvious reading. Whereas the more perceptive reading starts to look beyond surface level meaning, it goes deeper. And between strength, I think source A, which is a Henry Moore sculpture, it shows strength. It's 2 people sort of, you can just about tell, solidified together. Whereas source B is like a Greek, very obvious sculpture of a man with like lots of muscles across him. Okay, so that's what you should have. You should have B, B, and A as your learning check. Okay, moving on to slide 4 then. This is fairly straightforward, but I want to explain the concept of like for like with you. So when I examined last year and read the exam report this year, something that the examiners felt kept cropping up is that students weren't making like for like summaries on question 2. So if you look at this slide, a like for like summary is where you are looking at like an idea or a concept that is apparent in both. So for example, I can see in the Victorian photo that the children are sat in rows, and I can see in the modern photo that the children are sat really comfortably. That is a like for like comparison. If I were to compare the fact that the children are sat in rows with the fact that there are lots of bookshelves in the second image, that is not a like for like comparison. If you think about it like pieces of fruit, so if you have an apple and a banana, both are pieces of fruit, but they're not like for like pieces of fruit, they're completely different. If you had a red apple and a green apple, that is a like for like comparison. They're both pieces of fruit, they're both the same fruit, but they've got a different colour. Okay, so just make sure you're looking at things that are like for like. So the task for slide 5 then is essentially you looking for similarities and differences between the 2 images of a schoolroom. And what I want you to do initially for slide 5 is come up with 2 to 3 ways, in addition to the model there, that you can see in the image and what you can infer from this, okay? So I've given you the examples of what I can see really clearly, so the denotation of this image is that the children are sat in a way that seems really relaxed and informal. And what I can then infer from this, which is my connotation, is that the learning environment clearly isn't strict. It isn't rigid. The children can be comfortable. They don't have to be sort of regimented in these rows. So what you can see, which is the denotation, and then what you can infer, which is the connotation. Come up with 2 to 3 of your own, please. And then for slide 6, I want you to do the same again. Okay, so this time for the Victorian classroom. My model, you can see I've chosen a like for like comment. So in the modern classroom, I've talked about the way that the children are seated. And in the Victorian classroom, I'm also talking about the way the children are seated. What I can see, the denotation, is that the children are all sat in rows facing the same way. But what I can infer from that, which is my connotation, is that this suggests like regimentation, order, identical nature of children. They seem to almost lack identity. It looks as well, possibly as if it's all boys in that classroom. So come up with 2 to 3 of your own, please. And remember, the key here is we're trying to make them perceptive. Remember what the exam board said perceptive is. It's detailed, it's creative, it's unique, but it's still contextually appropriate. So remember that when you come up with your ideas. Okay, slide 7 is fairly self-explanatory. Okay, I just want you to rank these into the order of the levels. Level 4 being the highest, level 1 being the lowest. And then on the final slide, you'll see which one they fall into. Level 1, I mean, I'm sure there's nobody in our class that would do this, but level 1, what you need to be really wary of is just basically paraphrasing. So in this case with an image, telling me what I already know, but not telling me what you can infer from that. That's what this candidate is missing. They're just telling me what they can see, not what they can infer from that. If you look at 2 and 3, you can see that level 2, they start to do infer a little bit more. They say that there's lots of desks, which mean that they work hard. Okay, maybe that's what it means. And then they say that the children have square blocks to lean on, which are more colourful. That isn't quite an inference. I know that those blocks are colourful. I can see it. It doesn't infer about what that learning environment means or suggests or is like for those children. And so that is really underdeveloped. If I, as an examiner, was reading that, I would have to reread that, and that would probably go in the unclear bracket because it still doesn't tell me what the candidate can infer. Level 3 is fairly strong. It's very clear. I understand what the candidate is trying to say. And they take that bit further where they say not about necessarily that there's lots of desks, but actually they talk about what the desks are like. They're hard, which means they're probably quite uncomfortable. And they do make a like-for-like comparison. They talk about the coloured blocks in the other picture, which are more comfortable, okay, but they then take it further by saying this means that it's probably quite a creative and comfortable place to learn. That is really clear. It's contextually appropriate. But if you look across again to level 4, it becomes much more conceptual. It becomes much more about ideas. So whilst in level 3, they talk very much about the physicality of the classroom and how it would feel to be in that classroom. In level 4, it becomes very conceptual and about ideas. So they tell me that whilst the Victorian classroom has lots of rows, they don't talk about the fact that that would mean that they've got to work hard or be uncomfortable. They talk about what the ideas that represents about Victorian society more generally, and that is what makes it perceptive. They move from the physical to an idea. So they understand that this image actually is representative of Victorian sort of rigid morals and ideals. You could make a nice link there to Jekyll and Hyde. And it talks about on the other hand, in the other image, again, it talks about what's in the picture, but it talks about the ideas connected to it rather than telling me about what they can see and infer from that. So here, because the modern classroom has got these comfy blocks, actually the suggestion is that pupils are encouraged to work actively and independently for themselves, which again is an idea, it's a concept, and that's what moves it into perceptive. It's not just, oh, they're comfortable, which means their school must be nicer. That's a physical idea. It talks about the concept attached to that. Any questions? If you put a comment on Edmodo or email me and I'll try and clarify.